Have you ever just looked at a piece of modern art, the splatters and cubes, and then looked at a classical painting of a Greek god that looks almost real and thought, how on earth did we get from that to this? Well, the answer lies in the 19th century. And it wasn't a gentle evolution, let me tell you. It was a violent, revolutionary break, a great rupture that completely shattered thousands of years of tradition. And in doing so, it created the visual world we all live in today. Okay, let's get into it.
For centuries, art pretty much had a playbook, a clear set of rules. It was supposed to be rational, balanced, and its whole job was to show us a perfected, idealized version of the world. Think of all that classical art from Greece and Rome. But then, something started to shift.
Because in the span of about 100 years, which is really just a blink of an eye in art history, that entire system was completely dismantled. Art became subjective, emotional, chaotic, and eventually completely abstract. This is the story of how that incredible, and kind of crazy, transformation actually happened. So to really understand the revolution, you first have to understand the old regime. Before this rupture, the art world was completely dominated by one single powerful force, the Academy.
Academic art was the official, state-sponsored style. It was all rooted in the classical traditions, and its entire purpose was to present a vision of the world that was orderly, moral, and beautiful, but only in a very specific, pre-approved way. The academies were the ultimate gatekeepers of taste, and boy, did they have a strict set of rules.
And this system was incredibly rigid. First off, the subject you painted was everything. History, mythology, religion, that was the top-tier stuff. Everyday scenes, that was at the bottom of the barrel. Drawing in clear lines were seen as superior to messy, emotional color. And the big one, the artist's hand had to be invisible. If you could see the brushstrokes, it was considered sloppy and unfinished. The whole point was to create a smooth, perfect, idealized surface that had nothing to do with gritty, everyday reality.
But here's the thing. While the academies were trying to keep everything so orderly inside the studio, the world outside was changing, and changing fast. The foundations of this neat, tidy academic worldview were starting to crack under the pressure of a whole new reality.
The 19th century was just an age of massive upheaval. You had the Industrial Revolution radically reshaping society. Then, in 1839, photography is invented. Now, this was a huge deal. All of a sudden, if you wanted a perfect, realistic image of something, a machine could do it better and faster than any painter. This forced artists to ask a really new and scary question. What can painting do that a camera can't? And at the same time, new ideas from science and psychology were showing that reality was way more complex than it seemed.
So all this pressure starts to create the first major cracks in the academic wall. On one side, you've got Romanticism. This was a rebellion of the inner world. It prioritized raw emotion, passion, and the individual over the cold, hard reason of the academy. Then, on the other side, you had Realism, which was a rebellion of the outer world. Artists like Gustave Courbet just flat-out rejected ideal beauty. Instead, they chose to paint life exactly as it was, unvarnished, truthful, and focused on the real lives and struggles of ordinary people.
So if those early movements were the tremors, Impressionism, well, Impressionism was the earthquake. This was the first real, organized public rebellion against the Academy, and it sent a shockwave through the art world that literally changed everything. You see, when the Impressionists held their very first exhibition back in 1874, the critics were absolutely horrified. This quote from a review at the time just captures the outrage perfectly. To the establishment, these paintings, with their blurry forms and visible brushstrokes, looked lazy, unfinished, and frankly insulting. But the Impressionists weren't trying to be sloppy. They were trying to do something brand new. The Impressionists just weren't interested in telling moral stories or painting idealized scenes from history anymore. Their goal was so much more immediate, more personal. They wanted to capture the feeling of a single moment, that impression that light and color made on their eyes at one particular instant. And to do that, they had to develop a totally revolutionary new method. First, they left the dark studios and took their easels outside to paint en plein air and just observe reality directly. Second, they became obsessed with light. They'd paint the same exact thing over and over at different times of day just to capture its changing effects. And third, they used these fast, loose brushstrokes not to hide their process, but to record the energy and the immediacy of the moment itself. So the Impressionists broke all the rules about how to paint. The generation that came right after them, the Post-Impressionists, they took that freedom and they turned it inward, making the whole revolution deeply, deeply personal.
And this is the key difference right here. While Impressionism, for all its rebellion, was still about observing the outside world, Post-Impressionism used that very same freedom with color and form to explore the artist's internal world, their emotions, their ideas, their soul.
And this new freedom led artists in wildly different directions. You had Vincent van Gogh, who used that thick, swirling paint and intense, unreal color to pour his powerful inner turmoil onto the canvas. Then you had Paul Cézanne, who was on a totally different mission. He was all about structure, trying to break nature down into its basic geometric parts, the cylinder, the sphere, the cone. And then you had Paul Gauguin, who used these flat areas of symbolic color, not to show what he saw, but to evoke moods and spiritual ideas. Basically, each of them was inventing their own unique artistic language.
Once these pioneers showed that an artist didn't have to follow any rules but their own, well, the floodgates just burst open. The 19th century rupture had cleared the way for the total explosion of the 20th century avant-garde.
With all the old rules gone, art no longer had a single, unified purpose. The fragmented, fast-paced, and often chaotic feeling of modern life seemed to demand new and radical visual languages to describe it. And this led to a rapid-fire succession of new movements, all these different isms, each one pushing the boundaries of what art could even be.
First, you get the fauves, which literally means the wild beasts. Artists like Henri Matisse used color for pure emotional impact, completely disconnected from reality. For them, a sky could be orange and a face could be green, as long as it conveyed a powerful feeling.
Then, right on their heels, you have Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque pioneering Cubism. They shattered objects into these geometric planes, showing you a single thing from multiple viewpoints all at once. This completely destroyed the traditional idea of a single, fixed perspective that had dominated painting for centuries.
Following in Van Gogh's footsteps, Expressionism took that emotional turmoil and just amplified it. Artists distorted reality, stretching faces, clashing colors, all to convey the raw, anxious psychological state they felt was defining the modern world.
Then, inspired by Sigmund Freud's new theories about the mind, the Surrealists tried to bypass reason completely. They wanted to tap into the bizarre, dreamlike logic of the unconscious, creating scenes that felt both super realistic and totally impossible at the same time.
And finally, reacting to the absolute senseless slaughter of World War I, Dadaism just rejected logic itself. It embraced absurdity, nonsense, and what they called anti-art as this profound protest against a society that they believed had gone completely mad.
And so that great rupture of the 19th century leads us directly to our present. It was a century that started with one universally accepted set of rules for art and ended with this radical declaration that every artist had the right to invent their own. And that leaves us with a really fascinating question. After a century spent learning how to break all the rules, what does an artist do in a world where there are no rules left to break?